My girlfriend went on vacation with her guy best friend. She doesn't know I'm at the airport waiting for her. My girlfriend, Natalie, told me she was going to Cancun with her girlfriends for a week. Just the girls, she promised. You know them, Sarah, Ashley, Maria. We need this trip. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? We'd been together 3 years, but 2 days into her trip, Sarah posted an Instagram story from a local coffee shop in our city, not Cancun. I messaged her. Thought you were in Cancun with Natalie? She replied instantly. What? No, that trip got canceled months ago. Natalie said she told you? My stomach dropped. I called Ashley. She was at work. Maria was visiting her parents in Portland. Natalie had lied about the entire trip. I checked her Instagram. Beach photos, sunset cocktails, girls' trip captions. But something was off. No photos with the girls, no group selfies, just her, drinks, and carefully cropped beach shots. Then I saw it. A reflection in her sunglasses from yesterday's post. A man's figure next to her, shirtless. I zoomed in until my eyes hurt. I knew that tattoo on his shoulder. Dragon wrapped around a sword. Jake. Her guy best friend, who was like a brother to her. The one she swore I had nothing to worry about. The one whose apartment she'd stay at after late-night study sessions because it was closer to campus. I checked his Instagram. Private, but his bio had changed. Off the grid 11/15th to 11/22nd. The exact dates of Natalie's girls' trip. I called in sick to work and did something I'm not proud of. I logged into our shared iPad and checked her email. United Airlines confirmation, 2 tickets, Natalie Manley and Jake Tylerson, sitting together, returning November 22nd, 4:35 p.m. Today. It's 3:47 p.m. right now. I'm sitting at the arrivals area of Terminal C, baseball cap pulled low, watching the escalator from baggage claim. Their flight landed 20 minutes ago. My phone buzzed. Natalie. Hey, babe. Girls are grabbing one more drink at the airport bar before we split up. Sarah's driving me home. Be there in 2 hours. Can't wait to see you. Still lying. Still pretending she's with the girls. Still thinking I'm at home. Clueless. My heart is pounding so hard I can hear it over the airport announcements. Part of me wants to leave. Pretend I never found out. Save us both the confrontation. But I need to see it. Need to see them together. Need to see her face when she sees me. Wait. There they are. They're on the escalator. Natalie's got a new tan, wearing a sundress I've never seen. Jake's hand is on her lower back, guiding her. They're laughing about something on his phone. She looks happy. Happier than I've seen her in months. They're getting closer. 20 feet. 15. 10. She hasn't seen me yet. She's looking at Jake, saying something that makes him throw his head back, laughing. His hand moves from her back to her waist. 5 feet. She turns toward the exit and freezes. Our eyes lock. The color drains from her face. Ryan, what are you? Sarah's in town. Ashley's at work. Maria's in Portland. My voice is steadier than I expected. Jake steps forward, confused. Bro, what are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing. Thought you were off the grid? Natalie's eyes are filling with tears. Ryan, I can explain. Explain what? The fake girls trip? The lies? Or why his hand is on your waist? People are starting to stare. An elderly couple walks around us, whispering. It's not what it looks like, Natalie says, but her voice cracks. Really? Because it looks like you went to Cancun with Jake and lied about it. Jake drops his hand from her waist. Natalie, you said you told him. You said he was cool with it. Now I'm confused. Told me what? Natalie closes her eyes. Jake, stop. You said you told him about us. That you were going to break up after the trip. The ground tilts. About us? Natalie's crying now. We didn't mean for it to happen. When? My voice sounds far away. How long? Jake looks between us. 6 months. Natalie, you said he knew. You said you were separated but living together for the lease. 6 months. Every late study session. Every girls' night. Every time she said I was being paranoid about Jake. We're not separated, I tell him. We had sex 2 nights before you left for Cancun. Jake's face goes pale. He steps away from Natalie. You said, Natalie, what the fuck? She's sobbing now. I was going to tell you both, after the trip. I just needed time to figure things out. Figure what out? Jake's voice is rising. I left my girlfriend for you. You said you were done with him. Wait, what? You have a girlfriend? I asked Jake. Had. Natalie told me she loved me. Said she was leaving you. I broke up with Melissa last month to be with her. Natalie's backed against a pillar now, tears streaming. I do love you, Jake. But you love him too? Jake's laughing, but it's bitter. So this whole trip was what? A test drive? See which boyfriend you like better? That's when I noticed the jewelry. New earrings. A bracelet I don't recognize. The necklace she's wearing. Is that a promise ring on your necklace? I ask. She clutches it, guilty. Jake stares at it too. I gave you that, he says. Last night, when you said you'd tell him as soon as we got back. You proposed? I'm shouting now. Security is walking over. It's not a proposal, it's just a promise. A promise of what, Natalie? To keep lying to both of us? The security guard approaches. Is there a problem here? That's when Natalie's phone rings. The caller ID on her screen shows Mom. She declines it. It immediately calls again. Answer it, I say. Something in my voice makes her obey. She puts it on speaker. Natalie? Thank God. Is Ryan with you? Mom? Yes, he's here. Why? Don't come home. Either of you. There's been a fire. The words hit me like cold water. Fire. Our apartment. I watch Natalie's face change from guilty panic about getting caught to something worse. Real fear. Her eyes go wide and her hand shakes as she holds the phone. Jake looks between us, totally lost, probably wondering what fresh hell he just walked into. The security guard is still standing there waiting for us to either explain or leave, and I realize we need to move right now. Natalie's mom is saying something else on the phone, but Natalie just stares at me like she needs permission to care about our burning apartment after what she just did. I grab my keys from my pocket, even though I know my car is in the airport parking garage 3 levels up, and we don't have time for that. Jake seems to read my mind because he points toward the exit and starts walking. Natalie follows him automatically, and I follow her, and we're moving through the terminal like 3 strangers who just happen to be going the same direction. The security guard calls after us asking if everything is okay, but none of us answer. We push through the sliding doors into the pickup area, and Jake breaks into a jog toward the short-term parking. Natalie is trying to call her mom back, but it goes straight to voicemail. She tries again. Nothing. I can see her starting to spiral, that thing she does when she can't control a situation, and normally I'd put my hand on her back and tell her to breathe, but I can't touch her right now. Jake clicks his key fob, and a silver Honda lights up 2 rows over. We pile in without discussion, Jake driving, Natalie in front, me in back like I'm being chauffeured to witness my life falling apart. Jake pulls out of the spot too fast, and the tires squeal. Nobody says anything. Natalie keeps hitting redial on her phone. Her mom's voicemail picks up again, and Natalie makes this small sound in her throat that used to make me want to fix everything for her. Jake's hands are tight on the wheel, knuckles showing white, and I watch the way he drives, the way he knows exactly how to exit the parking garage, and I wonder how many times he's picked Natalie up from this airport, how many times they've sat in these exact seats. The parking arm lifts, and Jake guns it onto the highway. Natalie finally gets through to someone, and I hear her say her mom's name. She's asking what happened, if everyone is okay, where is she now? I can't hear the answers, but I watch Natalie's shoulders drop an inch, so at least nobody died. She's nodding and saying, okay, we're coming now. She hangs up and turns in her seat to look at me and Jake at the same time, which seems impossible, but she manages it. Her mom is at the apartment building. The fire department is still there. Nobody was hurt, but we can't go inside. Natalie's voice cracks on the last part, and fresh tears start down her face. Jake asks which exit, and Natalie tells him, and we're flying down the highway going at least 80. A cop could pull us over right now, and I almost wish one would, just to delay whatever comes next. But the highway stays empty, and Jake takes the exit too fast, the car leaning hard right. Natalie braces against the door. I brace against nothing. We wind through surface streets, and I recognize the buildings, the intersections, everything getting more familiar, until Jake turns onto my street, and I see the trucks. 2 fire engines parked at angles, lights still going, even though I don't see flames. There's a crowd of neighbors on the sidewalk across the street, everyone in coats over pajamas, holding phones up filming. Jake slows down, and we all see it at the same time. The 3rd floor of my building, right where our apartment is, the windows are black and broken. Smoke stains run up the brick above the windows like dark fingers reaching. The apartment next to ours looks almost as bad. Jake pulls over a block away because there's caution tape blocking the street. We get out, and I feel my legs shaking. Natalie starts walking fast toward the building, and I follow because what else am I going to do? Jake is beside me, and I hate that we're walking together like we're a team. A firefighter in full gear holds up his hand as we approach the tape. Natalie is already crying again, pointing at the building. I step forward and tell the firefighter that's our apartment, 3rd floor, the one that's burned. He nods and calls over his shoulder for the chief. A different firefighter comes over, older guy with gray in his beard, and he asks if we're the tenants. I say yes. Natalie is just crying. The chief lifts the tape, and we duck under. He walks us closer to the building and explains that the fire started in our unit approximately 2 hours ago. It spread to the unit next door before they got it contained. The building is still standing, but there's significant damage. Natalie asks about our stuff, and the chief gives her this look that says everything. It's gone. All of it. He's talking about accelerants and investigation and how we'll need to find somewhere else to stay. But I'm staring up at the black windows, where our bedroom used to be, where our bed was. where Natalie and I slept 2 nights ago before she left for fake Cancun. Jake is standing a few feet away, looking up at the damage with this blank expression. The chief asks if we have somewhere to go tonight, and Natalie nods, but I don't know where she's nodding about. A car pulls up fast behind us, and a woman jumps out. Natalie's mom. Natalie, and she runs to Natalie and pulls her into a hug. Natalie is asking if she's okay, if she's hurt, and Natalie is sobbing into her mom's shoulder. Then Natalie sees me, and her face does this confused thing. She looks at Jake, back at me. She asks Natalie why Jake is here if this was a girls' trip. Natalie doesn't answer, just cries harder. Natalie's face changes as she starts to piece something together. A police officer approaches with a clipboard and asks if we're the residents. I say yes again because apparently that's my job now, confirming over and over that this burned building was my home. The officer starts asking questions. When did we leave? Did we turn off the stove? Do we have renter's insurance? Natalie can't talk, so I answer everything. We left at different times. Natalie 3 days ago, me this morning. I don't know about the stove because I wasn't home when Natalie left. Yes, we have renter's insurance, I think. Natalie handles that. The officer writes everything down. Natalie keeps asking what Jake is doing here and why Natalie is so upset beyond the obvious fire situation. The officer notices the tension and asks if we all need to be present for this, or if one person can provide the information. Jake takes this as his exit. He says he's leaving and starts walking toward his car without looking at either of us. I feel something weird in my chest. Not quite sympathy, but something close. We're both Natalie's victims, but I also want to punch him in the face for every time he touched her. Natalie calls his name, but doesn't move to follow him. Natalie is demanding to know what the hell is going on right now. I tell her to ask her daughter and walk over to where the fire chief is talking to another firefighter. I need to know what happens next. The chief sees me coming and breaks away from his conversation. He explains that an investigator will come tomorrow morning to determine the cause. Until then, the building is uninhabitable. Even the apartments that didn't burn have smoke and water damage. He hands me a business card for victim services and a printed checklist of things to do after a fire. I stand there holding this paper and realize I have literally nothing except my phone, my wallet, and the clothes I'm wearing. Everything else is ash. My laptop with all my work files, my photos, my books, the guitar my dad gave me before he died, the watch Natalie got me for our anniversary. All of it gone. Natalie and Natalie walk up, and Natalie is using this gentle voice that she usually saves for when Natalie is really upset. She says we should all go to her house to figure things out. The way she says it makes clear she knows something is very wrong between Natalie and me, but she's not going to push right now. I tell her I appreciate it, but I'm going to a hotel. Natalie's face does this crumpling thing, and she realizes I'm not coming with them. Natalie looks between us and asks quietly if we're breaking up. The question just sits there in the smoky air. Neighbors are still gathered across the street watching our life explode. I finally say, I don't know what we are, but I need space. Natalie starts to say my name, but I'm already walking away, pulling out my phone to find Ted's number. He's my co-worker, and the only person I can think of right now who isn't tangled up in this mess. I call him while walking away from Natalie, away from her mom, away from the burned building. Ted answers on the third ring, sounding half asleep, and I tell him I need a huge favor. He picks me up 20 minutes later in front of a gas station 2 blocks from my apartment. I didn't want to wait where Natalie could see me. Ted pulls up in his truck and I climb in and he takes one look at my face and doesn't ask questions. We drive in silence for a few minutes before he finally asks if I'm okay. I give him the short version. Girlfriend lied about trip, was actually with another guy, caught them at airport, then found out our apartment burned down. Ted lets out a low whistle and says, I can crash at his place tonight. He doesn't ask for more details and I'm grateful. We stop at a 24-hour store and I walk the aisles buying basic toiletries, a pack of boxer shorts, a cheap t-shirt, deodorant. Ted waits by the door. The fluorescent lights are too bright and everything feels surreal. I'm buying toothpaste while my girlfriend is probably at her mom's house and my home is a burned shell. The cashier asks if I found everything okay and I almost laugh. I pay with my credit card and we leave. At Ted's apartment, he shows me the couch and gets me a blanket and pillow. He asks if I want to talk and I say, not yet. He nods and goes to his room and I finally look at my phone. 17 missed calls from Natalie, 8 from Natalie, 3 from my brother Quentin, a long text from Natalie begging to explain everything. There's also a voicemail from Jake that I'm not ready to listen to yet. A message from my property manager saying to contact him tomorrow about the lease and damage assessment. I turn off my phone and ask Ted if he has any beer. He brings me 2 and we sit on his couch watching basketball on mute while I try not to think about anything. The game is tied and going into overtime, but I can't focus on it. I keep seeing Natalie's face when she spotted me at the airport. Keep seeing the black windows of our apartment. keep thinking about Jake's hand on her waist. Ted doesn't try to make conversation, just sits there being present, and I'm grateful for that. The beer tastes like nothing. The basketball game ends, but I don't know who won. I don't sleep much. The couch is lumpy, and every time I close my eyes, I see Natalie's face at the airport or the black windows of our apartment. My phone keeps lighting up on the coffee table, but I ignore it. Around 6 in the morning, I finally give up on sleep and check the messages. 17 new texts from Natalie begging to talk. 5 from her mom asking if I'm okay. 2 from my property manager with the subject line, urgent. I delete them all without reading past the first line. At 8, my phone rings with an unknown number and I almost don't answer, but something makes me pick up. The guy on the other end introduces himself as Mateo Garcia, fire investigator, and asks if I can meet him at the building at 10 to walk through the damage. I tell him yes and hang up before he can ask more questions. Ted comes out of his bedroom in sweatpants and offers to drive me, but I shake my head and say he's already done too much. I order an Uber and stand outside his building waiting, and the whole ride back to my apartment I feel like I'm moving underwater. The building looks worse in daylight. Black streaks run up the brick from our windows and the smell of smoke hits me before I even get out of the car. Mateo is waiting by the entrance, wearing a hard hat and holding another one for me. He's maybe 40 with gray at his temples and the kind of calm voice people use when they're about to show you something terrible. We climb the stairs because the elevator is still out and he explains what I'm about to see. Structure is sound, but the unit is destroyed. Water damage from sprinklers. Everything will need to be documented for insurance. He opens the door to what used to be our apartment, and I stop breathing. The couch where Natalie and I watched movies is just a black metal frame. The kitchen is completely gone, just melted cabinets and a hole where the stove used to be. Our photos on the wall are curled black paper. My laptop on the desk is a puddle of melted plastic. Mateo is asking me questions about our stove and whether we had any electrical problems, but I can barely hear him over the ringing in my ears. Natalie's jewelry box that her grandmother gave her is a twisted lump of metal on what's left of the dresser. 3 years of life together turned to ash and water damage. The fire destroyed the physical proof of our relationship at the exact moment I discovered it was all built on lies. Mateo walks me through each room, taking photos and making notes on a clipboard. He explains the preliminary findings suggest it started near the stove, but he needs more time to figure out if it was electrical, gas, or just bad luck. He asks if Natalie was cooking anything before we left for the airport, and I have to explain the timeline. She left 3 days ago for what I thought was Cancun. She wasn't here when the fire started. He looks confused and asks where she actually was, and I tell him Mexico, just not with who she said. His face does this thing where I can see him putting pieces together and realizing this fire happened at the worst possible time. He writes something on his clipboard and says he'll have more answers in a few days. We finish the walkthrough, and I sign some forms, and he tells me to contact my insurance company as soon as possible. I nod and walk toward the stairs feeling numb. The property manager catches me in the lobby. His name is Dennis, and he's wearing the same polo shirt he always wears and looking stressed. He starts talking fast about the lease being in both our names and how we're liable for damage to the unit next door, where water from our sprinklers ruined their ceiling. He needs our insurance information immediately. He's holding a stack of papers and flipping through them while he talks. I realize I don't even know if Natalie kept paying the renter's insurance, or if we're about to get hit with a massive bill we can't cover. Dennis hands me the whole packet and says the lease is terminated due to the apartment being uninhabitable. We're released from it, but also we're both homeless now. He needs signatures from both of us and asks if I can get Natalie to come by. I tell him I'll figure it out and walk away before he can ask more questions. Outside, I finally listen to Jake's voicemail from last night. His voice sounds rough, like he's been crying or maybe drinking. He says he had no idea Natalie was still fully with me, and he feels sick about the whole thing. Melissa was right about Natalie being shady, and he should have listened. He's sorry for his part, even though he didn't know the truth. There's a long pause where I can hear him breathing, and then he says he's not trying to be friends or anything, but he thought I should know he got played too. The message ends. I save it, and don't know why. I call my brother Quentin, because I need someone who isn't involved in this mess. He answers on the second ring, and I give him the whole story. Natalie, Jake, Cancun, the airport, the fire, all of it. He listens without interrupting, and when I finish, he says I can stay in his spare room as long as I need. He lives 40 minutes outside the city, which would make my work drive terrible, but family support sounds better than Ted's couch or burning through money on a hotel. Quentin's voice is steady and calm, like he's already making plans. He tells me to come over tonight, and we'll figure out the practical stuff. His tone makes me feel slightly less like I'm drowning. My phone buzzes with a text from Natalie asking if we can meet to talk about insurance and lease stuff. I stare at it for a full minute before typing back that I'll meet her at the coffee shop near the building in 2 hours. I spend those 2 hours sitting in a park trying not to think about anything, but my brain won't shut off. I need to know if she paid the insurance. I need to know what's in our joint bank account. I need to know if we're about to get sued by the neighbors. When I finally walk to the coffee shop, she's already there at a corner table wearing clothes that are too big for her. Her mom's clothes. She looks exhausted and her eyes are red. We sit down across from each other and it feels like a business meeting between strangers. Natalie starts crying immediately and trying to say she's sorry, but I cut her off. I tell her we need to handle the emergency first and deal with the relationship stuff later. She looks hurt, but nods and pulls out her phone. She shows me the insurance app and says she filed a claim this morning. We do have coverage. She pulls up our joint bank account next, and we go through it together. $3,000. That needs to cover temporary housing for both of us, replacing basic stuff we lost, and whatever the insurance doesn't pay for the neighbor's damage. We make a list of immediate expenses and divide them up. Her handwriting is shaky. The conversation stays businesslike for maybe 20 minutes. We're discussing whether to close the joint account or just split it when Natalie asks if I listened to her voicemails. I tell her no. She starts talking faster, saying she never meant to hurt anyone and everything just spiraled out of control. I feel heat rising in my chest and tell her she made deliberate choices to lie to me for 6 months. She argues back that she was planning to tell me after the trip like that makes it okay. Our voices are getting louder and the barista behind the counter looks over at us. I realize we can't do this here in public. Natalie suggests we go to her mom's car in the parking lot and I agree because we still need to figure out living arrangements. We walk outside and get into a silver sedan that smells like her mom's perfume. Natalie sits in the driver's seat, even though we're not going anywhere, and I'm in the passenger seat staring at the dashboard. She starts talking and tells me the whole story. Late study sessions with Jake that became emotional affairs. Her convincing herself it wasn't cheating if they were just talking. The first kiss that made her realize she had feelings for both of us. She says she couldn't choose between us and couldn't face hurting anyone, so she just kept lying to everyone. Her voice breaks when she explains the logic, and I realize she's not some evil person, just someone who avoided hard conversations until the lies became so big they exploded. That doesn't make it hurt less, but it makes it make more sense somehow. I pull the ring out from where it's tucked under her shirt collar and hold it between us. Natalie's hand flies up to cover mine, but she doesn't try to take it away. Her face crumples and fresh tears start flowing. She admits Jake gave it to her their last night in Cancun at this beachfront restaurant where they watched the sunset. He told her he loved her and wanted a future together, and asked her to wear it as a promise that she'd tell me the truth when they got back. Natalie says she meant it when she said yes to him. In that moment, she really did plan to break up with me. But then she also meant it every time over the past 3 years when she told me she loved me and saw a future with us. She knows that doesn't make any sense, and she can hear how crazy it sounds, but she genuinely has feelings for both of us, and she couldn't figure out how to choose. I let go of the ring, and it falls back against her chest. The exhaustion hits me like a wave, and I tell her that loving 2 people doesn't excuse lying to both of them for 6 months. She nods, and her whole body seems to collapse inward. She whispers that she knows that now, and she's so sorry. We sit there in silence for a minute, and I watch people walk past the car, going about their normal days while mine is completely destroyed. Natalie wipes her face with her sleeve and pulls out her phone. She opens our banking app and turns the screen toward me. The joint account shows $3,000 and some change. She says we need to split it 50-50 and close the account. I agree, and we go through the steps right there in the car, transferring $1,500 to each of our personal accounts. Then she pulls up the insurance information and shows me the claim she filed this morning. We're both on the lease, so we'll have to handle everything together, even though I can barely stand to look at her right now. We make a list of immediate things we need to replace and try to figure out what belonged to who originally. Most of our stuff is so mixed together after 3 years that we can't even remember who bought what. Natalie suggests we just split whatever insurance money we get evenly and each replace what we need most. I tell her that works and add it to the notes app on my phone. We go through logistics for 20 minutes, like we're business partners dissolving a company. When we're done with the practical stuff, Natalie looks at me with red, swollen eyes and asks if there's any chance we can work through this. My throat gets tight, and I have to look away from her. I tell her honestly that I don't know, because right now I'm too angry and hurt and overwhelmed to even think about forgiveness. Part of me wants to say we can never come back from this, but another part remembers 3 years of good times, and I'm not ready to completely close that door yet. Natalie accepts my answer without arguing. She says she's staying at her mom's house for now and asks where I'm going. I tell her I'm heading to my brother Quentin's place across town. We exchange the information like we're coordinating a business trip, addresses and phone numbers in case the insurance people or property manager need to reach us. Natalie asks if she can text me, and I say only about apartment stuff, not personal things. She nods, and we both just sit there for another minute, not knowing how to end this conversation. My phone rings, and I nearly jump out of my skin. The caller ID shows a number I don't recognize with a local area code. I answer, and a woman's voice introduces herself as Courtney Monahan from the insurance company. She says she needs to ask me some detailed questions about our possessions and the state of the apartment when we left. I tell Natalie I need to take this and get out of the car. She stays inside while I pace around the parking lot answering questions. Courtney asks about our furniture, electronics, clothes, everything we lost. She wants to know if we have receipts or photos of valuable items. I explain that any photos were stored in the apartment on our laptop, an external hard drive, both of which are now melted plastic. She makes a sympathetic noise and says, that complicates the claim, but she'll work with what we can document from bank statements and credit card records. Then she asks a question that makes my stomach drop to my feet. She wants to know if either Natalie or I had any reason to want the apartment to burn. I actually laugh because the question is so absurd, but she doesn't laugh back. Courtney explains that the timing of both tenants being out of town during a fire triggers automatic investigation protocols. They have to rule out insurance fraud. I tell her we definitely didn't set the fire and I can prove where I was when it started. She says she'll need that documentation and thanks me for my cooperation. When I hang up, I'm shaking. I immediately call Natalie and she answers on the first ring. I tell her about the insurance investigator's question and she sounds freaked out. She says her adjuster just asked her the same thing about 20 minutes ago. We both realize at the same time how suspicious this looks. We were supposedly both in Cancun when the fire started, both conveniently out of town, both standing to benefit from the insurance payout. Except the truth is even messier than that. Natalie was actually in Cancun, but with Jake instead of her girlfriends. I was in town and went to the airport to confront them. We were literally standing at baggage claim when her mom called about the fire. Natalie says we need to be completely honest with the investigators about where we actually were and what was happening. I agree, even though it means admitting all the relationship chaos and lies. She points out that trying to hide it or keep our stories straight will look way worse if they find inconsistencies. I tell her I already mentioned I can prove where I was, and she should do the same with her flight records. We hang up, and I feel sick thinking about having to explain this whole mess to investigators. 2 days go by, and I'm staying at Quentin's place, sleeping on his couch. My phone rings again, and it's a different number. A man introduces himself as Mateo Garcia, the fire investigator assigned to our case. He wants me to come in for a follow-up interview. I grab all my receipts from the airport trip, the parking garage ticket, my credit card statement showing the gas station stop on the way there. Mateo's office is in a bland government building downtown. He's younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair and tired eyes. He offers me coffee and I take it even though my hands are already shaky. I sit across from his desk and he pulls out a thick file with our names on it. He starts with basic questions about the apartment layout and our daily routines. Then he asks me to walk him through where I was the day of the fire. I take a breath and explain the whole situation. Natalie lied about her travel companions. I discovered it through social media and email snooping. I went to confront her at the airport. I show him all my receipts and the timeline. We were literally at Terminal C when the fire started. Mateo takes notes and doesn't react to the relationship drama. Then, he asks if Natalie or Jake had any reason to set the fire. The question shocks me even though I probably should have expected it. I tell him honestly that I don't think so, but then I pause. I also didn't think Natalie would lie to me for 6 months, so clearly my judgment about her is compromised. Mateo writes something down and says he appreciates my honesty. He asks a few more technical questions about our stove and whether we smelled gas before we left. I tell him I wasn't at the apartment for days before the fire because I was at work and then went straight to the airport. He thanks me for coming in and says he'll be in touch. That night at Quentin's house, I finally break down. We're sitting in his living room with beers, and I tell him everything. The lies, the confrontation, the fire, and now the insurance investigation asking if Natalie or Jake might have said it. Quentin listens without interrupting, and when I'm done, he asks the hard question. Does I think Natalie could have done something before she left for Cancun? I want to immediately say no, but the word gets stuck in my throat. I realize I don't actually know what Natalie is capable of anymore. A week ago, I would have sworn she'd never cheat on me, and look how that turned out. The fact that I have to even consider whether my girlfriend of 3 years committed arson makes me feel sick. Quentin sees my face and puts his hand on my shoulder. He says, "Cooperate with the investigators, secure my finances, find permanent housing. Let the professionals figure out what happened with the fire. I know he's right, but it doesn't make me feel any better. I finish my beer and grab another one from his fridge. 3 days later, Mateo calls with preliminary findings. I'm at work when my phone buzzes and I step outside to take it. He says the fire started from a gas leak near the stove, likely from a faulty connection that had been slowly leaking for days or weeks. It wasn't arson, and it wasn't anyone's fault. Just terrible timing that it ignited while we were both gone. The relief that hits me is so strong I have to lean against the building. Neither Natalie nor Jake did anything intentional. Nobody tried to burn down our home for insurance money or revenge. It was just a shitty accident on top of an already shitty situation. I thank Mateo and he says the report will be sent to our insurance company within a week. After I hang up, I stand outside for a few more minutes. The cosmic irony isn't lost on me that our relationship literally exploded the same day I discovered all the lies. I go back inside and try to focus on work, but my mind keeps wandering. A few days later, I get a message request on social media from someone named Melissa. The profile picture shows a woman with long dark hair, and I don't recognize her at first. Then I read her message asking if we can talk, and I realize this is Jake's ex-girlfriend, the one he left for Natalie. I'm curious enough about Jake's side of things that I agree to meet her for coffee. We pick a place halfway between our locations, and I get there first. Melissa walks in 15 minutes later, and I recognize her from Jake's old Instagram photos before he went private. She's pretty, in a girl next doorway, wearing jeans and a sweater. She sits down across from me and doesn't waste time with small talk. She says she knew Natalie was playing Jake, but he wouldn't listen to her warnings. Melissa explains she and Jake were together 2 years when Natalie started coming around more often. At first, it was just study sessions and group hangouts, but then Natalie started making comments about relationship problems with me. She'd tell Jake I didn't understand her, or I was too controlling, or we were growing apart. Jake ate it up because he liked feeling like a hero supporting her through hard times. Melissa noticed that Natalie's stories didn't quite add up. She'd say I was emotionally distant, but then post couple photos with me looking happy. She'd claim we barely talked, but then mention conversations we'd had. When Melissa pointed out these inconsistencies, Jake accused her of being jealous and controlling. He said she was trying to ruin his friendship with Natalie because she was insecure. Melissa pulls out her phone and shows me old text conversations with Jake. I can see her trying to point out red flags and Jake getting defensive. She tells me Natalie specifically told Jake that we were separated, but still living together because breaking the lease was too expensive. Natalie said she was planning to move out after finding a new place, and then we'd officially break up. Jake believed this completely. He thought he was dating someone who was technically single, just stuck in a shitty housing situation with her ex. That's why he broke up with Melissa and gave Natalie the promise ring. He wasn't trying to help Natalie cheat. He genuinely thought she was available. Melissa says she tried to warn him one last time that Natalie was lying about her relationship status. She told Jake to ask me directly if Natalie and I were really separated. Jake refused and said Melissa was being toxic. He blocked her number, and that was the end of their relationship. Hearing this makes me realize Natalie didn't just lie to me. She constructed elaborate alternate realities for both of us, telling each of us what we needed to hear to keep us both around. I ask Melissa why she's telling me all this, and she leans back in her chair. She admits partly it's vindication because Jake finally sees she was right about Natalie, but she also thinks I deserve to know the extent of Natalie's manipulation. Melissa pulls up more texts, these ones from Jake after the airport confrontation. I can see him devastated and angry, realizing Natalie lied about everything. He texts Melissa apologizing for not believing her and calling himself an idiot. Melissa shows me his message saying he feels sick knowing he helped Natalie cheat without realizing it. She tells me she's not getting back with Jake because the trust is broken and she's moved on, but she wanted me to know that Jake genuinely didn't know he was helping Natalie cheat. He's a victim of her lies too, just like me. I thank Melissa for the information, and we sit there for a minute in weird solidarity. We're both people who got burned by Natalie's inability to have difficult conversations. Melissa finishes her coffee and stands to leave. She says she hopes I find someone honest next time, and I tell her the same thing. After she walks out, I sit there alone processing everything she told me. The manipulation ran deeper than I thought, and somehow that makes it hurt even more. I leave the coffee shop and drive back to Quentin's place with Melissa's words still running through my head. The apartment fire report comes through my email that evening, and I forward it to Courtney along with all the documentation she requested. She responds within an hour saying the claim looks good, and we should see the payout within 2 weeks. I text Natalie to let her know, and she replies asking if we can meet to discuss how to split everything. I suggest the same coffee shop where we handled the bank account, neutral territory where neither of us has to feel trapped. She agrees, and we set a time for Thursday afternoon. Thursday arrives, and I'm already sitting at a corner table when Natalie walks in looking tired. She's wearing clothes I don't recognize, probably borrowed from her mom, and she sits down across from me with a folder full of papers. Courtney sent us both itemized lists of what the insurance will cover, and Natalie has gone through and highlighted things in different colors. She slides the papers across to me and explains her system. Yellow for things that were clearly mine, blue for things that were clearly hers, green for shared items we need to figure out. Most of the page is green. We spend the next hour going through every item, trying to remember who bought the couch, whose grandmother gave us the coffee table, whether the TV was a gift to both of us or something one of us owned before we moved in together. It's exhausting and sad, picking apart 3 years of building a life together and trying to separate it into neat categories. Natalie gets emotional when we're discussing the bedroom furniture, and I have to remind her we're just handling logistics right now. She nods and wipes her eyes, and we keep going through the list. We finally agree to split the $12,000 evenly, $6,000 each, and we'll both just replace whatever we need most, without fighting over who technically owned what. Natalie signs off on the agreement, and I email it to Courtney right there from my phone. Natalie closes the folder and sits back in her chair, and there's this heavy silence between us. She asks if I've thought any more about us, about whether there's any way to fix things. I tell her honestly that I don't see how we come back from 6 months of lies. She argues that the relationship had real love in it too, and those 3 years meant something. I agree they did, but I don't know how to trust her again. The trust is just broken, and I can't imagine a path back to believing anything she tells me. Natalie gets defensive and says she made mistakes, but I'm not perfect either. I point out that whatever my flaws are, I didn't lie about secretly dating someone else for half a year. She starts crying again and says, I'm being cruel, and I remind her that I'm being honest, which is more than she was with me. The conversation spirals, and we're both getting frustrated and raising our voices slightly, and the barista gives us a look. Natalie grabs her folder and stands up and says she can't do this right now. She walks out, and I sit there alone at the table feeling drained and angry and sad all at once. My phone buzzes with a text from her apologizing for getting upset, but she stands by what she said about the relationship having real love. I don't respond. The next day at work, Ted mentions during lunch that his building has a studio apartment opening up next month. The current tenant is moving out, and the landlord is looking for someone reliable. Ted says he could put in a good word for me if I'm interested. I jump at the chance immediately. Living in Quentin's spare room has been fine, but I need my own space again, somewhere that's just mine with no shared history or memories attached. Ted gives me the landlord's number, and I call during my afternoon break. The rent is $900 a month, which is manageable with my insurance payout and salary. I schedule a viewing for Saturday morning, and when I see the place, I know it's right. It's small, and the kitchen is tiny, but it's clean and quiet, and the windows get good light. I fill out an application on the spot and put down a deposit. The landlord says I can move in December 1st, which is 3 weeks away. I feel like I'm taking the first real step toward rebuilding my life separately from Natalie. My phone buzzes with a text from Natalie saying the investigators cleared the apartment, and we can go sort through what's salvageable if we want to try. She asks if I want to go together or separately. I think about it, and decide together makes more sense, since we'll have to negotiate who takes what anyway. We agree to meet at the building Saturday afternoon, and I stop at a hardware store to buy boxes and masks. When I pull up, Natalie is already there, standing on the sidewalk with her mom's car parked behind her. We don't say much, just nod at each other and head inside. The property manager lets us in and reminds us we have 2 hours before he needs to lock up again. Walking into the apartment in daylight is worse than I expected. Everything is black and wet, and the smell of smoke is overwhelming, even with the masks on. We work mostly in silence, occasionally finding something that survived and having to negotiate who takes it. Natalie finds a photo album that somehow made it through in a drawer. The pages are water damaged, but the photos are mostly intact. We sit on the floor looking at pictures of us happy together at the beach, at her graduation, at my brother's wedding. I feel grief for what we had before she ruined it. Natalie is crying quietly next to me, and I don't know what to say, so I just keep turning pages. There's a photo of us with Jake at some party from 2 years ago, and I remember thinking that night how lucky I was to have a girlfriend who got along with all my friends. The irony makes my chest hurt. Natalie puts the album aside, and we keep sorting through the wreckage. She's going through the bathroom trying to salvage toiletries when she makes a small noise. I look over, and she's holding Jake's promise ring on its chain. It must have fallen when she was showering before leaving for the airport. She stares at it for a long moment and then asks what I think she should do with it. I'm struck by how absurd it is that she's asking my opinion about jewelry from the guy she cheated with. I tell her that's not my problem to solve. and she needs to figure out her own relationship with Jake without using me as a sounding board. She looks hurt, but nods and puts the ring in her pocket. We continue sorting in tense silence, and by the time the property manager comes back, we've filled 4 boxes total. Natalie takes 2, and I take 2, and we load them into our separate cars without discussing what comes next. That night at Quentin's place, I'm unpacking my boxes when he knocks on the door and asks if I'm doing okay. I tell him honestly that I'm not sure. He sits down on the edge of the bed and suggests I should talk to someone professional about everything that's happened. He says his friend sees a therapist who helped him through his divorce, and maybe I'm resistant at first, but the more I think about it, the more I realize I probably do need help processing all this. Quentin gives me the name of his friend's therapist, and I look her up online. Her name is Ariel Cannon, and her website says she specializes in relationship trauma and life transitions. I send an inquiry through her contact form, and she responds the next morning with available appointment times. My first session with Ariel is the following Tuesday. Her office is in a converted house downtown, and she meets me in the waiting room with a warm smile. We sit in comfortable chairs, and she asks me to tell her what brings me in. I unload the whole story, starting from discovering Natalie's lies through the airport confrontation, and the fire and everything since. Ariel listens without interrupting and takes occasional notes. When I finish, she asks some clarifying questions about the timeline, and then helps me see patterns I missed. She points out how Natalie's conflict avoidance isn't just about this situation, but probably shows up in other areas of her life. She asks if I noticed other times Natalie avoided difficult conversations or tried to keep everyone happy at the expense of honesty. I realized there were signs, times she'd tell me one thing and her friends another, times she'd agree with me but then complain to others. I just didn't see it as a pattern before. Ariel also points out my tendency to ignore red flags because I wanted to trust Natalie. She asks if I noticed things that seemed off but talked myself out of suspecting anything. I admit there were moments where Natalie's stories didn't quite add up, or she was vague about where she'd been, but I didn't want to be the paranoid boyfriend, so I let it go. Ariel says that's normal, but something I need to work on, learning to trust my instincts instead of dismissing them. She asks what I want moving forward, and I realize I don't actually know beyond getting my own apartment and not feeling this angry all the time. She says that's a good place to start, and we schedule weekly sessions for the next month. 2 days after my first therapy session, Natalie calls me crying. I almost don't answer, but something makes me pick up. She's sobbing so hard I can barely understand her at first. When she calms down enough to talk, she says Jake won't respond to her messages and blocked her number. She says she needs someone to talk to about it, and she doesn't know who else to call. I'm shocked she's calling me for emotional support about losing the guy she cheated with. I tell her that's wildly inappropriate and she needs to call a friend or her mom. She gets upset and says I'm the only one who understands the whole situation because I was there. I have to firmly explain that I'm not her friend right now and definitely not her therapist about Jake. She apologizes through tears and says she just feels so alone. I tell her again to call her mom or Sarah or literally anyone else because I can't be the person she leans on about this. She apologizes again and hangs up. I tell Ariel about the phone call in my next session and she helps me work on setting boundaries. She explains that Natalie is probably struggling with losing both relationships simultaneously and is reaching out to whoever will listen, but that doesn't mean I have to be available for her emotional support. Ariel helps me practice ways to firmly but kindly maintain boundaries if Natalie contacts me again about Jake or relationship stuff. We role-play different scenarios, and I feel more prepared to handle it if it happens again. The property manager sends an email with final paperwork officially ending our lease and outlining our liability for damage to the neighboring unit. The total comes to $4,000, and Natalie and I are each responsible for $2,000. I read through all the legal language and signed the documents electronically. The $2,000 basically wipes out most of my insurance payout after I've already bought basic furniture and supplies for the new apartment. I'm frustrated about the financial hit, but also just want to close this chapter. I pay my portion through the property management portal and send the property manager an email telling him to handle Natalie's payment separately because we're no longer managing finances together. He confirms receipt and says Natalie has already paid her portion too. Saturday morning arrives and it's moving day. Quentin and Ted show up at 9 with Quentin's truck and we load up the few things I own. It takes less than 2 hours because I have almost nothing now. A bed frame Ted helped me pick up from IKEA, a small desk, some basic kitchen supplies, the boxes I salvaged from the fire. We get everything into the studio apartment and set up the bed and desk, and suddenly I have my own place. The space is small and mostly empty, but it's mine. Quentin and Ted leave around noon, and I spend the evening setting up properly, hanging the few photos I salvaged, organizing my tiny kitchen, making the bed with new sheets. Natalie texts, asking if I need help moving, and I tell her I'm all set. She responds with a sad emoji, and I don't acknowledge it. That night, I sleep in my own place for the first time in a month, and I feel both lonely and relieved. The apartment is quiet and empty, but it's a clean slate with no memories attached. I asked Natalie why she didn't just break up with me if she had feelings for Jake. She stared at the park bench between us and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She said she loved us both and couldn't choose. The words came out quiet and shaky. She said she liked feeling wanted by two people, and the attention made her feel special. Hearing this honest selfishness was somehow easier to process than her previous excuses about not wanting to hurt anyone. At least this was the truth. Natalie said she's in therapy now too, and realizing she has patterns of people-pleasing and conflict avoidance that go back to childhood. Her therapist told her she creates situations where she doesn't have to make hard choices because someone else will make them for her. I told her I'm glad she's getting help, but that explanation doesn't fix what she did to me and Jake. She nodded and said she knows. We sat in silence for a minute watching joggers pass by on the trail. Natalie finally asked directly if there's any possibility of us trying again in the future. I told her honestly that I don't think so because the trust is too broken. She started crying harder and said she knows she destroyed the best relationship she ever had. I felt a pang of sadness, but also clarity that I can't be the one to comfort her through consequences of her own choices. We walked to a bench and sat down. She asked if I hate her. I told her I don't hate her, but I'm angry and hurt, and mostly just sad about what we lost. She said she understands. We agreed this is probably our last conversation for a long time. We stood up and hugged goodbye, and it felt like closing a book. She smelled like her mom's laundry detergent instead of her usual perfume. I walked to my car without looking back. At my next therapy session, I told Ariel about the final conversation with Natalie. She asked how I'm feeling about closure. I realized I don't have complete closure because I still have questions about why Natalie made the choices she did, but I'm accepting that I might never fully understand her thinking. Ariel helped me see that I can move forward without perfect understanding. She asked what I want my life to look like now that I'm single and starting over. I didn't have a good answer. She gave me homework to think about what I actually want instead of just reacting to what happened. We started working on rebuilding my sense of self outside of the relationship. I admitted I'm scared of dating again because my judgment feels broken. Ariel said that's normal after betrayal, but I shouldn't let Natalie's actions make me doubt my entire ability to assess people. She reminded me I had valid reasons to trust Natalie based on 3 years of history. The lies were sophisticated and deliberate. That doesn't mean I'm bad at reading people. Work has been a good distraction through all this. My boss noticed I'm putting in extra hours and called me into his office. He asked if I'm okay. I gave him the abbreviated version about the breakup and fire. He was sympathetic and said he appreciates my dedication, but he's concerned I'm avoiding processing by staying busy. He suggested I take some vacation time to actually deal with everything instead of just working through it. I realized he's right. I've been avoiding my feelings by filling every moment with tasks and projects. I checked my vacation balance and saw I have 2 weeks saved up. I scheduled a long weekend trip to visit a college friend in Denver just to get away from everything. My boss approved it immediately and told me to take more time if I need it. The weekend away helped me gain perspective. My friend picked me up at the airport and we grabbed dinner at a place near his apartment. He listened to the whole story over pizza and beer. He said I'm better off knowing the truth now, rather than years down the road when we might have been married or had kids. We spent Saturday hiking in the mountains. The physical activity and fresh air cleared my head in a way therapy sessions couldn't. Sunday we hit a few breweries, and I realized I'm laughing again and thinking about the future instead of just surviving the present. My friend asked if I've considered that the fire was almost a blessing, because it forced a clean break from Natalie and the life we built together. I wouldn't call it a blessing, but I see his point that starting completely fresh has some advantages. No shared apartment to divide up, no furniture to argue over, no constant reminders of what we had, just a clean slate and a new beginning. When I got back from the trip, I needed groceries. I went to the store near my new apartment. I was comparing pasta sauce prices when I saw Jake 2 aisles over looking at cereal boxes. We made eye contact, and both froze. He walked over slowly. He asked if we can talk. I said sure. We ended up sitting in my car in the parking lot with the groceries in the back seat. He apologized for his part in everything, even though he didn't know the full truth. I told him Melissa reached out and explained his perspective. I believe he didn't know Natalie was lying about our relationship status. Jake said he feels like an idiot for believing Natalie's stories and ignoring red flags. I admitted I did the same thing. We bonded briefly over being manipulated by someone we both loved. He said Melissa warned him multiple times that Natalie's stories didn't add up, but he accused her of being jealous. Now, he sees Melissa was right all along. I told him I ignored my gut too when things felt off. We sat there in silence for a minute. Jake told me he's moving to another city for a job opportunity, getting away from the whole situation. I felt a weird sense of loss even though we were never actually friends. He asked if I've talked to Natalie recently. I explained we had a final conversation and agreed to no contact for now. Jake nodded and said he's done the same thing. Natalie apparently isn't handling being cut off by both of us very well according to mutual friends. She's been reaching out to people trying to explain her side. Jake said most people are keeping their distance because they feel betrayed by the lies too. We wished each other luck and shook hands. He got out of my car and walked to his truck. I watched him drive away and felt like that chapter is truly closed now. I went home and put away my groceries. 3 months after the airport confrontation, I'm settling into my new life and routine. Work from 9 to 5, therapy on Tuesdays, gym 3 times a week, occasionally seeing friends on weekends. I've been on a couple casual dates that didn't go anywhere, but I'm not in a rush to jump into another relationship. At my therapy session, Ariel asked how I'm doing with trust issues. I admitted I'm more cautious now, but trying not to let Natalie's betrayal make me paranoid with everyone. I'm learning to spot red flags earlier and trust my gut when something feels off. Ariel said that's healthy growth. She asked if I'm ready to reduce our sessions to every other week. I said yes. We scheduled our next appointment for 2 weeks out. Quentin invited me to a family dinner at his place. I realized I've been isolating more than I thought. I made an effort to reconnect with family and friends I neglected while dealing with the breakup aftermath. My mom was there with my dad. My aunt and uncle came too. Everyone was careful not to ask too many questions about Natalie. My mom pulled me aside while we were cleaning up after dinner. She asked gentle questions about whether I'm dating anyone. I told her I'm focusing on myself right now. She seemed satisfied with that answer. She said she's proud of how I've handled everything. Being around family reminded me that I have a support system beyond romantic relationships. I felt grateful for people who showed up during the crisis. My dad gave me a hug before I left and told me I'm doing great. Quentin walked me to my car and said the same thing. I got a message from Sarah the next day, one of Natalie's friends who was supposed to be on the Cancun trip. She apologized for not reaching out sooner. She said she had no idea Natalie was lying about the trip and feels terrible that her Instagram post was how I found out. Sarah explained that Natalie has been struggling and lost several friends who felt betrayed by the lies. While Sarah feels bad for Natalie, she understands why people are keeping their distance. Sarah said she wanted to check on me and make sure I'm okay. I appreciated Sarah reaching out, but told her I'm not looking for updates on Natalie. Sarah respected that boundary. She said she understands and won't bring Natalie up again. We chatted for a few more minutes about other things, and then said goodbye. I walked into Ariel's office and sat in the familiar chair by the window. She smiled and asked how I'd been doing since our last session. I told her things felt different now, more stable. She nodded and asked me to think about what I'd learned from everything that happened. I sat there for a minute, trying to find the right words. I told her I learned I'm tougher than I thought, that I could survive losing everything at once and actually rebuild something better. I also learned to trust my gut when something feels wrong instead of ignoring red flags because I want to believe the best in people. Ariel leaned forward and pointed out that I was talking about the future with excitement instead of fear. I realized she was right. I wasn't just pretending to be okay anymore. I actually was okay. My boss called me into his office 3 weeks later. I thought maybe I'd messed something up, but he closed the door and told me to sit down. He said he'd been watching how I handled everything this year, the personal crisis and the fire and all of it. He said I never let it affect my work quality, and that showed real character. Then he told me I was getting promoted to senior analyst with a significant raise. I thanked him and shook his hand, trying not to look too shocked. After I left his office, I sat at my desk doing the math in my head. The raise meant I could afford a bigger place when my studio lease ended. I started thinking about what kind of apartment I wanted, what furniture I'd pick out, how I'd decorate it. This would be the first time in my adult life I was building a home that was completely mine, with no shared history attached to it. Ted invited me to dinner at his place the following Saturday. I showed up with beer and he introduced me to his girlfriend Rachel and her friend Monica. We all sat around his dining table eating pasta and talking about work and movies and random stuff. Monica sat across from me and we kept ending up in side conversations that made everyone else fade into the background. She was a teacher at an elementary school and had this way of telling stories that made ordinary things sound funny. When dinner ended, we all moved to the living room and Monica sat next to me on the couch. We exchanged numbers before I left, and I asked if she wanted to get coffee sometime. She said yes, immediately. We met at a coffee shop near her school on a Tuesday afternoon. Monica ordered a latte, and I got black coffee, and we sat by the window watching people walk past. The conversation flowed easily without any awkward silences. She asked about my last relationship, and I gave her the short version about finding out my girlfriend was cheating and our apartment burning down on the same day. Monica's eyes went wide, and she said that sounded like a nightmare. Then she told me about her ex, who she dated for 2 years before discovering he'd been lying about having a job and was actually living off his parents' money. We both laughed about how messed up people could be. I appreciated that we were both being honest about our baggage instead of pretending we had perfect pasts. Monica and I went on 3 more dates over the next 2 weeks. Dinner at a Thai place, a movie that was better than expected, a walk through the park on a Sunday morning. I realized I was actually ready to date again, but I also noticed myself being more careful about everything. I told Monica on our 4th date that I needed to take things slow and build trust gradually. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand and said she understood completely. She told me she appreciated that I was being honest about what I needed instead of pretending everything was fine. We agreed to keep things casual and just enjoy getting to know each other without any pressure. It felt different from how things were with Natalie, healthier and more balanced. I was grabbing coffee before work when I saw Natalie standing in line ahead of me. Natalie's mom looked tired and older than I remembered. She turned around and saw me, and her face went through about 5 different emotions in 2 seconds. We stood there awkwardly until she asked if we could talk for a minute. We sat at a corner table, and Natalie apologized for Natalie's behavior. She said she raised her daughter better than that, and she was so sorry for what Natalie put me through. I told Natalie that I appreciated the apology, but Natalie's choices weren't her fault. Natalie started crying quietly and thanked me for being kind. She said Natalie was doing better now, had a new job, and was seeing a therapist regularly. I told her I was glad Natalie was working on herself, but I'd moved on with my life. Natalie hugged me before we left and said I deserved so much better than what Natalie gave me. I agreed. 6 months had passed since the airport confrontation. I sat in my new 1-bedroom apartment that I'd moved into last month, looking around at furniture I'd picked out myself. Monica and I had been dating for almost 2 months, and things were going really well. Work was good with the promotion and the extra money. I still saw Ariel every other week, and the therapy sessions continued helping me process everything. Some days I still felt angry about what Natalie did and sad about the time I wasted. But mostly, I felt grateful that I found out when I did, instead of years down the road, when we might have been married or had kids. Quentin came over for dinner and commented that I seemed like myself again, but stronger somehow. I realized the crisis had forced me to develop independence and confidence I didn't have before. Monica asked me during dinner at her place if I was ready to be exclusive. I looked at her sitting across from me in her kitchen and realized I was. We talked for over an hour about what we both wanted from a relationship and where we saw things going. I appreciated that we were being open about expectations instead of just assuming we were on the same page. I told her about my trust issues from Natalie and how sometimes I still got anxious about being lied to. Monica said she understood and promised that honesty was the most important thing to her in any relationship. I believed her. We agreed to be official, and I felt genuinely excited about this new relationship in a way I hadn't felt in years. I finally opened the last box from the fire that had been sitting in my closet for months. The photo album Natalie and I had salvaged from the wreckage sat on top of some old papers. I took it to my couch and slowly flipped through pictures of us at the beach, at Quentin's wedding, celebrating my birthday 3 years ago. Looking at our happy faces didn't hurt as much as I expected it to. I could appreciate that those moments were real, even though the relationship ended badly. I kept 3 photos that reminded me of genuinely good times and put the rest in the recycling bin. It felt like a healthy way to acknowledge the past without staying stuck in it. Ariel asked me during our session if I felt ready to move to as-needed appointments instead of regular weekly visits. I thought about it for a minute and realized I'd processed most of the trauma and had developed solid ways of handling stress and anxiety. I told her I felt ready to trust myself without needing weekly support. We scheduled one final regular session for next month and agreed I could reach out anytime in the future if I needed help. I felt proud of all the work I'd done to heal over the past 7 months. Monica came over for the family barbecue at Quentin's house. My parents were there along with my aunt and uncle and some cousins. Everyone was friendly and welcoming to Monica, and she fit in easily with my family's loud conversations and constant joking. My mom pulled me aside while we were cleaning up after eating and said she was proud of how I'd handled everything this year. She also said she really liked Monica and could tell Monica cared about me. Quentin walked over with more plates and joked that I seemed way happier now than I ever did with Natalie. I realized he might be right. The relationship with Natalie had become comfortable but stagnant toward the end. I'd been ignoring problems instead of dealing with them directly. With Monica, everything felt more honest and balanced. 8 months passed, and I checked my email one morning to find a message from Natalie with the subject line, "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a solid minute, my cursor hovering over the delete button. Part of me wanted to trash it without reading, keep moving forward without looking back. But another part of me was curious about what she had to say after all this time. I opened it. The email was long, maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs, and I could tell she'd spent time writing it. She apologized again for everything she put me through and said she was taking full responsibility for her choices. Natalie explained she'd been in therapy twice a week for the past several months, working through her issues with avoiding hard conversations and trying to please everyone. She wrote that her therapist helped her see how her fear of disappointing people led her to lie instead of being honest about her feelings. The email said she wasn't asking for forgiveness or trying to get back together. She just wanted me to know she understood the damage she caused. Natalie wrote that she hoped I'd found happiness and wished me well, and the whole thing felt different from her previous attempts to explain herself. It felt genuine, like she'd actually done the work to understand what went wrong. I read it twice and then closed my laptop and sat there thinking about whether I should respond. Monica came over that evening and I showed her the email, asking what she thought I should do. She read it carefully and then handed my laptop back with a small smile. Monica said it was completely my decision whether to respond, but she wanted me to know she didn't feel threatened by my past or insecure about Natalie reaching out. I appreciated that she trusted me enough to let me handle it however I wanted. I thought about it for another day, and then decided to send a brief response thanking Natalie for the apology and wishing her well in her therapy and healing process. I kept it short and friendly, but made it clear I'd moved on with my life. Natalie wrote back within an hour with just a simple thank you and said she was glad I was doing well, and that was it. We left it there, and I felt like we'd both gotten the closure we needed. Monica and I talked that night about how we'd handle communication with exes going forward, and we agreed on being open and honest about any contact that happened. The conversation made me feel closer to her because we were building trust through honest communication instead of hiding things. Work sent me to a conference in Chicago the following month, and I was gone for 4 days. Monica and I texted throughout each day, just normal stuff about what we were doing and random thoughts we had. We video called every night before bed and talked about our days, and the whole thing felt easy and natural. I realized during one of those calls that I trusted her completely and didn't have any anxiety about what she was doing when we weren't together. That was huge growth from where I'd been after discovering Natalie's lies, when I'd felt paranoid about trusting anyone. When my flight landed back home, I walked out of the baggage claim area and saw Monica standing there holding flowers. She'd taken time off work to surprise me at the airport, and I felt this wave of gratitude for how different this relationship was. There was no anxiety, no suspicion, no checking her phone or wondering if she was lying, just genuine care and effort from both of us. I found a bigger apartment about 3 weeks later, a 1-bedroom place that I could actually afford with my promotion salary. Monica came with me to look at it before I signed the lease and helped me imagine how to set up the space. We spent weekends shopping for furniture and picking out decorations, and she had good ideas about what would work in each room. Monica stayed over most nights, but kept her own place, and I liked that we were building toward living together eventually, but not rushing it. The apartment started feeling like home once we got everything set up, way more than the studio ever had. I hung some photos on the walls, bought actual furniture instead of the cheap stuff I'd replaced after the fire, and made the space feel like mine. One night I was cooking dinner in my new kitchen, and realized I'd fully rebuilt my life after everything got destroyed. The fire had taken all my physical possessions, and Natalie's betrayal had destroyed my relationship, but I'd managed to create something better from the wreckage. Monica and I drove to the mountains for a weekend trip in early spring. We hiked during the days and stayed at a small cabin at night, and we had long conversations about what we wanted from life. I was honest about how my experience with Natalie made me more cautious about relationships, and Monica shared her own story about a bad breakup in college that shaped how she approached dating. We realized we were both looking for the same things: honesty and partnership and building something real together. Monica said she valued communication over everything else because her ex had shut her out emotionally, and I told her I needed a partner who was direct, even when conversations were hard. The trip was relaxing and fun, and I found myself imagining a future with Monica without the anxiety I used to feel about commitment. We drove home Sunday evening, and I felt confident this relationship was on solid ground. Quentin invited me over for dinner 10 months after the whole airport mess. We sat on his back deck with beers, and he looked at me and said, I seemed like a completely different person from the devastated guy who'd shown up at his door after the fire. I thought about everything that happened over those 10 months and realized he was right. I'd grown more during that time than I had in the entire 3 years with Natalie. The crisis forced me to develop real independence, learn to set boundaries, and figure out what I actually wanted, instead of just going along with someone else's plans. Quentin said he was proud of how I'd handled everything, and I told him I was proud of myself too. I'd lost my home and my relationship on the same day, but I'd somehow managed to build something better from nothing. Monica and I celebrated our 6-month anniversary at a nice Italian restaurant downtown. We ordered wine and pasta and talked about how fast the time had gone. Halfway through dinner, Monica reached across the table and took my hand and told me she was falling in love with me. I felt my chest tighten in a good way, and I told her I felt the same way. It was different from how things had been with Natalie, more stable and honest, and like we were actually building something together as equal partners. We talked about moving in together eventually, and what our timeline might look like, maybe after we'd been dating for a year. I felt excited about the future instead of anxious, and the relationship felt like real partnership instead of me managing Natalie's emotions and avoiding conflict. Monica and I split the check and walked to her car holding hands, and I thought about how lucky I was to have found someone who valued the same things I did. A full year passed since everything fell apart at the airport. I woke up on that anniversary date and lay in bed thinking about how much had changed. I had a job I was good at with a recent promotion, a girlfriend I loved who loved me back, a comfortable apartment that felt like home, and close relationships with my family and friends. I'd developed healthy ways to handle stress through therapy and exercise, and I'd learned to trust my instincts about people. The fire destroyed my old life, but gave me the chance to build something better and more authentic. Natalie's betrayal taught me to value honesty above comfort, and to pay attention when something felt off. I still had occasional moments of anger when I thought about the 6 months of lies, but mostly I felt grateful that I discovered the truth when I did. If the fire hadn't happened that exact day, I might have stayed with Natalie longer and wasted more time in a relationship built on deception. Life wasn't perfect, but it was genuinely mine now, built on honest choices and real connections. That was worth more than the comfortable lies I'd been living before everything exploded.